experimenting with something, a side project recently. Right here is an experiment I set up with my program counter. And I actually attached these two bottom bits here to go in line with the reading of the dual read memory, so that it reads both every even and odd memory cell in sequence to get the instructions, and so that way it can decode instructions twice as fast. And since it's always going to be every even and every odd, these two bits are static and they're supposed to be inserted into these two positions right here. But besides that, I've set up a clock here with a 3-tick or so delay, and a set for it, a reset for the whole system, and the decrement enable. And so look at how fast this can actually go. I just now noticed this when I was working on it. And decrementing is just as fast. And since this cell calculates the carry in latency of, I think, 2 or 3 ticks, the entire incrementer is this fast no matter what state it's in, unlike adders usually are. And so, theoretically, if I can get the other components working this quickly, then the entire processor can operate this quickly, and that would be blindingly fast. But of course, that's not necessary for these earlier models, since I'm only trying to get them working good for right now. But that's all for this micro segment. So I've been adding to the work that I've done so far, putting components together and arranging and planning. And so far I have 5 primary components for the processor that are all separate modules that can be swapped out for other things, which is actually perfect for what I'm looking for. That the entire structure of how this is going to work needs to be as modular as possible, especially the ability to replace parts with better parts is very important. Makes it very extensible. But starting off, we have the stack memory, the very old, still very reliable stack memory that really doesn't have anything wrong with it. And next to that, we have the 64 addressable 8-bit integer slots in the sort of onboard RAM. And the way this is going to work, it's going to be dual addressable so that each first and second entry is going to be read, or every even and odd entry is going to be read simultaneously. So you'll actually only iterate through this 32 times before either wrapping around or just halting. And so that would actually make the processor about twice as fast as it used to be. Perhaps not quite twice as fast, but pretty close. On top of just that, this memory, I have a feeling is going to be read and write accessible slightly faster than the old 16 bits of memory, although I might be wrong about that in the calculations. But as you can see, it's also a very huge block of data that's sitting here. And for this to only be 64 8-bit integers worth of space, it's going to be madness to store anything beyond a kilobyte. In fact, I don't even think something like that is feasible without using exploits like special data compression or using series of stack memories because they're more compact. What else? This is the control unit here. Right now, it has two states, technically four states if you count these triggers here. And so it has the first and second steps and one trigger at the end of each step. And both triggers are separate, of course. The first step is to sort of address the two slots in memory, and the trigger for that is to write those to these two onboard registers here. The second step is to, I think it's to increment the program counter and also push this register out to here, I'm pretty sure, for addressing. And there's also this here that happens on the second steps trigger here that activates everything that's been initialized. I might be forgetting some functions of how that works. Also, there's a very good reset feature now. I'm pretty sure it's completely glitch proof, so the reset won't leave some sort of weird state in the system remaining. Over here we have the IO bus buffers, which are essentially the exact same as how they were before. I did some experimentation, and it turns out that this is already pretty good as far as buffers go. I don't think I'm going to be needing to do very much more with these. Over here we have the ALU, which is currently about half to 2/3 assembled, and it's already functioning really well with most of its operations in place. And yeah, I had some problems trying to put it together, but most of those problems are fixed now. It has a built-in PRNG, a pseudo-random number generator, and that will simplify random numbers significantly. I'm probably going to assign that to something like the second from last slot in the sort of instruction set for this. It has its own sub-instruction set. In fact, all of these components are going to have their own separate instruction sets that are going to be fed from these four bits here. And this segment here is what's going to be addressing each individual module separately. And so you are talking within the domain and then what to do with that domain, which I think is much more modular than having everything be monolithic and arbitrary like usual. This is just for memory addressing. Actually, and now that I think about it, no, actually, only one operand is necessary for this ALU. So the way this ALU works, it only has one input, that's 8 bits, and you may ask, well, how do you fit more than one one-part operations or unary operations in it? Like addition, how do you add two numbers together? Well, there's actually multiple ways to do that, since there's also an onboard accumulator register right here. And so the most common way to do something like addition is to first either set the accumulator to the first number or add that number into it, and then just add the second number as well. And so even though it would take two operations to do all of that, it would also be much more optimal for multiple technical reasons that I don't think I'm qualified to explain. But just be assured that this is probably the best way to do it for right now. And since I think all operations can be built from just conditionals and incrementing and decrementing, so you don't really need any special functions built into this like square rooting or exponents, even though you could if you wanted to. I think exponentials might be something I'll consider, or well, actually, multiplication should come before exponentials. Squaring is a unary operation, and so is cubing, but I prefer arbitrary exponential sort of compatibility because there's a lot of cases in which you're raising to the 3.75 power or rooting to the 3.75 sort of modifier, but that's mostly for scientific applications. Although, who said that I'm not trying to make a scientific processor? So far, this is probably going to be more than 200% as efficient as the last processor, and much more useful too, with quadruple the RAM and an additional stack that it didn't have before. The stack having 16 entries available within it. This should be an absolute beast of a processor, at least in terms of scrap mechanic. I don't think anyone has built such a great processor yet, so I'm hoping to sort of pioneer that field. Although I'm sure there were a lot of really good processors made in secret, but I don't think there's any actual official consumer processors on the Steam Workshop right now. Although there might be. I should actually go check soon. Uh, uh, I just had a great idea. Let's say if I get some Patreon soon, I'll release this new processor on the workshop as a sort of holding it as ransom. Diabolical. But nevertheless, that's the entire progress report for right now. So I decided in a separate segment I should sort of demonstrate the ALU as it currently stands, partially completed. To begin with, I should show some of the sort of exciting new features like the PRNG. So watch the accumulator, and so now we can generate pseudo-random numbers and store them in the accumulator directly, all within, I think, less than 3 or 4 ticks, which is great. That would be a cycle that's around, what, 7 to 8 ticks a maximum. Although I don't have variable cycling in yet, I'm actually just tuning the clock cycle so that it can handle the maximum the sort of latency component in the whole processor, which is the wrong way to do it, might I add. But it's also the cheapest way to do it, so that's what I'm settling on for right now. In order to do a variable sort of clock cycle or instruction cycle, you would probably need to do something weird like storing the pre-calculated cycle lengths in some sort of separate ROM, which I'm just not in the mood for right now. But back on topic, we also have the set function, and here we have an increment function and a decrement function. We also have add and subtract, as well as arithmetic negate. Something fun about arithmetic negate is that 0 remains 0 instead of turning into -0. So arith negate functioning as intended. Just as a demonstration, going to negate and increment by 1, and then negate again, and you can see it's the same number but -1. So that's actually synonymous with decrementing. But I decided to have a dedicated decrementer because I thought that would be much faster, which it definitely is. But I'm also using the arith negate module that I made from this sort of incrementer module. What else after that? I have, oh yes, the shift. So, watch this. I'm going to set the accumulator to that. I'm going to, wait, there's this combination. I'm pretty sure. So now I'm going to use, you see back there, that's the logical shift module. It's a rotational shift, which makes it so that you can do fun things with shifting. I haven't had arbitrary shifting implanted into this yet, and I'm also not entirely sure if I can right now, under in a reasonable time frame, that is, at least. So I'm just settling on rotational shift for the moment because it was so easy to implement and is also so very fast. One thing I haven't implemented yet is any of the flags. I also haven't I haven't implemented the carry enable feature, which makes it so you can carry into things like arbitrary shifting and also arbitrary arithmetic. And there's a lot of arbitrary things going on with if you want to store numbers bigger than can be held within the 8-bit integer limit, which is almost always the case for practical applications, and especially in floating point numbers. Imagine if you were trying to use a floating point number that you were trying to fit into an 8-bit integer space. That just wouldn't work very well. But other than that, there's also one last feature, and that is the clear feature that clears the accumulator, which the ALU must always have. It's a very important feature, but that's all for this particular segment.